we get on in a half hour on Sunday morning, right? You know what else I don't feel like, or in times in my life that I haven't felt, and I know a lot of other people feel like they don't get enough of in life, is money. Do you ever feel like you don't make enough money? Come on, you're in church. Somebody can be honest this morning, right? You ever feel like you don't make enough money? Oh my goodness. I felt like that before. I remember being 18 years old, and I was working in construction part-time, and I was in college, and I was making about $8 an hour building pole buildings and doing demolition work and all kinds of stuff. And it seemed like to me at the end of every week, I was about $200 short on everything that I needed to be able to pay what I needed to pay and to be able to buy things that I wanted to buy. Seemed like I was about $200 short at the end of every week. And I used to think to myself, I had this thought when I was 18, it was, man, if I could just get a job where I cleared $500 a week, I'd be set. I'd be set. Then I could afford to pay everything I needed to pay, and I could afford to do everything that I wanted to do. And fast forward about 13 years, and I had that job. I was clearing over $500 a week, sometimes much more than that, sometimes twice that amount. And you know what the funny thing was? At the end of each week, I was still $200 short to pay everything I needed to pay and to do everything that I wanted to do. So I thought, if I can just get in my job where I'm clearing $1,000 a week every week, then I'll be set, right? Maybe you guys can relate to what I'm talking to. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person in the room who has experienced this strange phenomenon. I think that there's a plague of material discontentment in our society. Would you agree with that? Yeah. There's a plague of discontentment, material discontentment in our society. Spiritual discontentment is probably a good thing, right? We're supposed to be hungry for God. But material discontentment, that's not a good thing. Because it drives us to the endless pursuit of more. The endless pursuit of more. And we have to, as people, especially as the people of God, we have to find a way to be content with the things that we have in life, or else we're going to find ourselves locked into that endless pursuit of more. And that's a very, very bad thing. So I want to keep going today with the series that I've been calling The Good Life. Right? Because everybody wants a good life. We want to live a good life here on the earth, right? Before we get to heaven. But very few people know what a good life actually is, and even fewer people know how to actually get that good life. Thankfully, we don't have to figure it out, because the wisest man who ever lived, a man named Solomon, who was the third king of Israel, figured it all out long before we were ever here, around 1000 BC, and he wrote it, 900 BC, I'm sorry, and he wrote it all down in a book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes, which just means the teacher or the preacher. And today I want to show you in the book of Ecclesiastes what Solomon found out about the pursuit of more. We're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 through 20 this morning. And as you turn there, as you find it, it's always a challenging book to find in the Bible. It's a book of, right after the book of Proverbs. But as you turn there, something was really cool about Solomon is that he was a scientist, right? And I said this before in the first message that I preached. He's a scientist. What he did was he made observations about things, and then he drew a conclusion about the nature of that thing. And Solomon was in a really unique position, right? To be able to observe and to draw some conclusions about the nature of the pursuit of more. Because not only was he the wisest man who ever lived, he was also one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest man who ever lived on the face of the earth. And in this passage of Scripture, he starts out by making two observations about the pursuit of more, right? These will be the first two things that are on the outline in the bulletin if you're following along there. The first one is that the more you have, the more you want. Here's what he said in verse 10. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income, this too is meaningless, right? So he observed that no amount of money can satisfy the longing of the human heart for more of it. The human heart has an insatiable appetite for more and more, and it can never be satisfied. It's like the open grave, right? You can't put enough in it to ever satisfy it. So the first observation is that the more you have, the more you want. The second one, he's going to hit right off the bat, is the more you have, the more you worry. Okay? And watch this in verses 11 through 12. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? Eye candy, right? You ever want some eye candy? You guys aren't very responsive today. You better wake up. I'm going to throw something at you. The sleep of the laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. See, the more that you have, the more that you acquire, the more that you accumulate in life, the more that people try to take what you have, whether it's through outright theft or whether it's through some scheme. And often these people are the closest people in your life to you. They're your friends and they're your families. A lot of you are nodding your head when I'm talking about that. So you have to watch it, right? You have to feast your eyes on it. You have to constantly guard over it. And though you enjoy the sight of it, eye candy looks good, it fills you with continuous anxiety, the thought of losing it, so that you can't even sleep at night. And Solomon had a lot, and you would think he wouldn't be worried about losing some of it, but he was. The more you have, the more you worry. Now he's going to draw a conclusion based on these observations about the pursuit of more. He says, I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there is nothing left for them to inherit. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what did they gain since they toil for the wind? His conclusion was that the pursuit of more in life as the goal of life is a grievous evil. And that can be translated another way as a heartbreaking tragedy. It's a heartbreaking tragedy to live your life in the pursuit of more material wealth. And there's three reasons why in this passage. The first one is that it is harmful. Did you catch that in verse 13? Wealth is often hoarded to the harm of its owners. And there's three D words, that harm. There's three D words I want to tell you about the harm that comes from hoarding wealth. The first one is the disturbed mind. The disturbed mind. The more you have, the more you worry. You end up with anxiety. The second D word is a distracted life. You have a distracted life. The more that you pursue material things in life, the less time you have available to pursue meaningful things in life. Other meaningful things that have life-enriching, enjoyment-giving value to them. Right? Things like serving God. Jesus said in Matthew 6:24, you can't serve both God and money. You can't. There's a time when they're going to pull you in opposite directions. And if you don't let go of the one, you're going to be pulled in half. Other things like having friends. That has meaningful value. I talked about that last week. The setup for that passage we looked at last week when we talked about friendship was that Solomon observed a man who was all alone in life. He didn't have anyone close to him. And the reason he didn't is because he spent his entire life in the pursuit of more, and his eyes were never content with anything that he acquired. And at the end of his life, he was absolutely miserable. Solomon concluded, this is a meaningless and miserable business to spend your life in the pursuit of more material wealth to the neglect of investing in human relationships. It results in a disturbed mind, a distracted life, and another D word, a dissatisfied heart. And that one's kind of obvious. But see, the pursuit of more makes promises. It promises some things to you. More. Material wealth, it makes a promise of satisfaction. And we already talked about that. And it can't deliver on that promise. Because the human heart has an insatiable appetite for more. There isn't enough. There's never enough in order to be satisfied, to feel like you have enough. Another promise that it makes is the promise of security. The promise of security. No matter what happens, I'll be okay because I have this stored up. But it can't deliver on that promise because of the next reason why the pursuit of more is a heartbreaking tragedy in life. It is easily lost. It is easily lost. It's the second reason why it is a heartbreaking tragedy to live your life in the pursuit of more. He said in verse 14, wealth is often lost through some misfortune, right? I already said you can lose it through theft. Everybody has their eyes on what you have. People that you know and people that you don't know. You can lose it through the misfortune of a bad investment. You can invest without having good counsel. You can lose it through the misfortune of a black swan event. You know what a black swan event is? I bet Bill does. It's something that happens, it's unpredictable, and it affects you economically, and there is no way to prepare for it. The Great Depression was a black swan event. Nobody saw that coming, and lots of people, probably everybody lost something. A lot of people lost everything. The coronavirus shutdown, the economic stuff that happened as a result of that was a black swan event. It negatively affected our economy, right? No one saw it coming. I don't care who says they did. No one saw it coming. None of us were ready for it. It's a heartbreaking tragedy whenever we live our life in the pursuit of more and then it's lost through some misfortune. But even if we guard against this, even if we could guard against this perfectly, the pursuit of more is still a heartbreaking tragedy because of the last reason. No matter how well we guard it, it's temporary. It's temporary. In verse 15, he said, as we come, so we depart. You can't take it with you. It doesn't matter how much you amass in this life, you can't keep it. The only time that you'll ever see a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer is if somebody's making a bad joke or if the funeral director forgot to pay the rent. You're never going to see it. You can't take it with you. Solomon summed up his observation in his conclusion in verse 17. He said, all their days, the person who lives their life pursuing more, they eat in darkness with great frustration, affliction, and anger. It results in a life of hopelessness, a life without light, a dark life. It results in emotional turmoil, a great frustration and anger and anxiety. So on the basis of empirical data, Solomon could say, as a scientist, that the good life does not come through the pursuit of more. It doesn't come that way. And now he's going to tell us how it does come. In verse 18, he says, this is what I have observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them, for this is their lot. Someone say, it's my lot.
It's my lot.
Very good. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot, say, I got to accept my lot.
I got to accept my lot.
You didn't say it like I said it. And be happy in their toil. This is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. So in this passage, there's some really good news, right? God wants us to enjoy the things that we have in life, and He wants us to enjoy everything that we do, right? Material possessions even. That's what the good life is. It's to enjoy our life here on the earth, everything that we have and everything we do. But it doesn't come by the pursuit of more. The good life comes by being content with what you have. That's the big point in this message, being content. The good life comes by being content with what you have. And if you look in verse 19, the good life, it was a result, this enjoyable life was a result of what? Accepting your lot. Accepting your lot. That's to be content, right? Your lot, a lot is a portion of something that belongs to you, right? It was used in the Bible of the land that was portioned out to the 12 tribes of Israel. That was their lot in the land of Canaan, was the portion of land that they were given. Your lot in life is a lot like your yard. Hey, you guys have a yard, like you have your own yard. You live in a house and you have a yard. Maybe you don't if you're in an apartment, but think about it like a yard, right? Your yard has boundaries. Everything within those boundaries of your yard, is available for you to enjoy, right? You can do anything you want with the space and with the things that are in your own yard. but you can't go outside of the limits of your own yard and try to enjoy what's in someone else's yard, right? Like if you try to build a garage on your neighbor's property, or you're trying to put a pool in on your neighbor's property, you're going to have problems, right? Unless you have a really, really good relationship with your neighbor. Our lot in life is to enjoy the good things that God gives. Don't miss that. In verse 19, it said that God gives us the material things in life that we enjoy. Did you see that? It said that He gives us wealth. He gives us possessions. He gives us the house. He gives us the car. He gives us the job. He gives us the hobbies that we enjoy doing. He gives us the passions. He gives us all the stuff that He uniquely wired us to be able to do and to enjoy doing while we're here on the earth. And here's the thing. Everything that God gives us is good and it's enough.
Amen.
Everything that God gives is good and it's enough. So when you read that, I think it should be really easy to enjoy life then. Because God's given me good things and He's given me enough of them. But see, it isn't easy to enjoy life. It's actually really hard, and the reason for that is that we have a sinful nature, right? We have a sinful nature that causes us to look at the good things that God has given us and the abundance of them, and to question whether those things are indeed good or whether they are indeed enough, right? We start to doubt that. So our sinful nature does another thing then. It causes us to want to trespass. It makes us want to trespass every boundary that God has put in place, right? We do it. That's what it means to sin. We trespass the boundary. We leave our yard. We leave the portion that God has given to us because we think there's something better on the other side. And that's how the pursuit of more begins in life. You know, it often begins discontentment with the portion that God's given us. It often begins when we look at our neighbor's yard. When we stand at our property line and we look at what's over there, and it looks a whole lot better than what's in our yard. Harvard University did a study in 2018. What they did, pretty surprising, they took people who had more than $1 million in the bank. Some with much more, $100 million. But people, you had to have more than $1 million in the bank. And they asked them one question, and it was a multiple choice answer. They asked them, how much more would you need to be satisfied? How much more would you need to feel content? Right? To believe that you had enough. And the answers, the possible answers were A, 10 times more than what I have. B, 5 times more. C, twice as much. Or D, none. I'm content. I have everything that I need. In that survey that they did, only 18% of the people polled chose D, none. I don't need any more. Right? I'm content with what I have. The other 82% said they needed at least twice as much more. But the highest answer that was chosen was A, 10 times more. And it didn't matter whether they had $1 million or whether they had $100 million in the bank. And what they found out is that being discontent in life had nothing to do with the amount of stuff or the amount of wealth that you have. They found out it had to do with the neighborhood that you lived in. Because the people if they lived in a neighborhood where their immediate neighbors had more than them, they almost invariably were not content with what they had and needed to have at least as much as what their neighbors did, if not more. And they perceived often that their neighbors had a great deal more than they did. And see, our sinful nature makes that happen. Our sinful nature causes us to look over that fence and to question whether what God has given us is good and whether it is enough. So we need help, right? We need help to be able to enjoy the things that God's put in our yard. And thankfully God does that. God gives us the ability to be content. He gives us its ability. It's a supernaturally given divine ability of contentment. In verse 19, did you see that? God gives us the stuff. He gives us the wealth. He gives us the possessions. But then he gives us another thing. It said that he gives us also the ability to enjoy them. How? By accepting our lot. by being content with what he gives. He gives us the ability to be able to see that what he has given us is good and that it is enough. You could call it the gift of contentment. It's the gift of contentment. And that gift of contentment enables us to enjoy all the other gifts that God's given. When I was a little kid, at Christmas time, I remember there'd be all kinds of presents when I was real little, like I wanted Transformers and stuff like that, and all kinds of toys. And my parents were really good. Like they really went all out on Christmas. And I remember all the presents being wrapped up under the tree, and you'd be all excited, and I'd rip them all open, and like 90% of the stuff that I got took batteries. And you know it's Christmas morning. You know that this thing I want to play with takes 6D batteries, you know, and you know there's nowhere to get them, so you think, I'm dead in the water. Oh, who knows when the stores are going to open, when I'm going to be able to get batteries. But see, they always did something else. And we had stockings, and the stockings were always stuffed. You know what they were stuffed with? Little tiny presents. And you know what was all wrapped up in them?
Batteries.
The batteries. The batteries. I was just as happy to pull the batteries. You get these toys and think, oh my goodness, I hope the batteries are in here so I can enjoy this thing, you know? And you find the batteries, and you're really excited because now you know you can enjoy the gift to its full potential. And just so you know, in the next two verses of Ecclesiastes, in chapter 6, verse 1 through 2, Solomon says there's some people that God doesn't give the gift of contentment to. He gives them the wealth and the possessions, but they're unable to enjoy them because God doesn't give them the gift of contentment. But I want you to know this morning that if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, God has given you the ability to be content. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, was on house arrest in Rome. First time he was in prison, he was on charges that he didn't commit, being on trial for charges that he didn't commit. And it was nice that they let him live on house arrest, right? They didn't actually put him in a prison. But the thing about living in a rented house is you got to be able to pay the rent. He couldn't work because he was chained to a Roman soldier 24/7. And he was going back and forth on trial in the Roman Senate. So he didn't have anything, and he didn't know how he was going to pay his rent. But he said this in verse 12 of chapter 4 of Philippians, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And now even if you're not a Christian, you probably heard this verse, Philippians 4:13. It is one of the most misquoted, misapplied verses in the entire Bible, right? We like to take this verse and we like to stamp it on anything in life we want to do that's super difficult to say that we can do it. It was in Tim Tebow's eye black. He was saying that he could win the Rose Bowl by the power of Christ. It was on Evander Holyfield's robe when he fought Lennox Lewis. Think about that. Evander Holyfield was saying, I can beat up Lennox Lewis with the power of Christ. He lost that fight. That's because that ain't what this verse is saying. What it's saying is that the strength, in Philippians 4:13, the strength that God gives us, the strength that Christ gives us is the ability to be content in any situation, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of winning and losing, regardless of having a lot or having a little, regardless of success or failure. He gives us the ability to be content. And the word for content here is a really unique word. It's hardly ever used in any other place in the New Testament if it's used at all. And it just means to have enough. It just means to have enough. So God gives us the ability to see that what we have is enough to meet our needs. To meet our needs. That's the divinely given gift of contentment. Let me say just a couple things about this idea of contentment, Christian contentment. I want to address just two things that people think about it that I think is really wrong-headed. The first one is that being content is more than saying that God is enough. Being content in life is more than saying that God is enough. We say things like, I have Jesus. If I lost everything today, I would be fine, no matter what happens. And that is absolutely true, right? I have been deeply impressed on my soul that my well-being in life does not depend on anything I have or on anything I do. It depends only upon the closeness I have in my relationship with Jesus Christ. Amen. Right? That is absolutely true. And there will be times in life when extreme want is forced upon us by circumstances, we won't have enough shelter. We won't have enough food. We won't have enough water. We won't have enough of anything that we need just to meet our basic needs in life. And in those moments, we can be content. But when we say that that's all there is to Christian contentment, I think that we're being really, really dishonest about it. Because there ain't a person in this room that doesn't want to have the basic needs met. Every one of you wants to have enough shelter, enough food, enough water, enough of what you need to survive. And if you see someone, if one of us in this room lost everything, right, and we became homeless, what would you do? If that happened to me, would you walk up to me and say, "Hey, Jim, Jesus is enough, be content"? No, you'd probably empty your wallet, right? To make sure I had enough food to eat, to make sure I had enough water to drink, to make sure I had somewhere to stay, right? Because it wouldn't be good for me to be living out in the cold. You'd probably help me to find a job if I had lost my job, so that I could know that I would have a constant supply of enough. Because we know instinctively that it isn't good to have not enough. It's not good. So it isn't wrong, right? It isn't wrong for us to want to be content with the material things that we have in life. Get that out of your head. It isn't wrong to want to be content with the material things you have. God promises to give you those things, and He also intends for you to enjoy them. We saw that in the passage that we read. But we have to be content in order for that to happen. Let me say one more thing about being content, Christian contentment. Being content doesn't mean it's wrong to want to improve your life. Okay, it isn't wrong to want to make upgrades. It isn't wrong to want to make improvements. The question occurred to me this week, like, how long should I put up with the junk lawnmower that I got to mess with every time I want to mow my grass before I upgrade it to something better? How long should I put up with a junk car that's in the garage every other week before I upgrade it to something better? How long as a family should you live in a house that's just too small for your needs before you upgrade it to something better? And it occurred to me that there is a very, very fine line in life between something that is a justifiable upgrade and the pursuit of more. And when we cross that line between a justifiable upgrade and go in and we leave the portion that God's given us into a portion that wasn't given to us, then we invite misery into our life inevitably. So in order to avoid crossing that line between a justifiable upgrade and the pursuit of more, we have to ask ourselves 4 questions. The first one is this is kind of common. This is kind of easy, right? Is this thing that I want, is it a need or is it a want? See, God promises to give us everything we need in life. He doesn't promise to give us everything we want, but He does promise to give us some things that we want. But see, we have a really, really well-developed ability to turn a need, to turn a want into a need, right? To justify one as a need. Did you ever get the new car bug? Anybody ever get the new car bug? Yeah, that happens whenever, like, you're driving a car, you've had it for a long time, it's paid off, which is really nice, but you miss that new car smell. And you miss how tight the steering wheel feels. And you miss how smoothly it runs, you know? And so the first time that your brakes squeak in the car you're driving, the very first car lot you drive by, it's in there, and you're trading it in. And then the bad thing is, about 3 months down the road driving that new car, you wish you'd have kept the old one because your new payment is a little bit salty. Sometimes we justify a want. We have a good ability to turn it into a need. So we have to be pretty good at distinguishing between a need and a want. But wants, like I said, wants aren't always bad. In order to tell if something that you want is wrong, you have to ask yourself another question. Do I need this to be content? Do I need this to be content? See, it isn't wrong to want a better job. It isn't wrong to want a better house or a better car, a better gun, a better guitar. But it is wrong if you feel like you need that thing to be content in life. That's when you've crossed the line into the pursuit of more. But even if you answer this question right, and you don't need this thing to be content, you can still cross the line into the pursuit of more. So you have to ask yourself, will this thing cause me to neglect other things in life that matter? See, God's given us a portion of time in life. And if something that we want, getting that thing means that we have to go outside of the portion of time that God's given us so that we don't have any time for family, so that we don't have any time for friends because of that new job, because of the payment on that new car, that new house, or if we can't be involved in our church, or if we can't serve Christ in the capacity that He's called us to serve, because that getting that thing that we want means we won't have enough time left to do it, then we have crossed the line into the pursuit of more. And when we do that, now we're neglecting ourselves, the enjoyment that we can get from those other things in life that God intended for us to get, that we now no longer have time for. And if you determine that if maybe this is all, you're all good at this point, and the thing you want is it's all good, it won't affect your time, but there's one more thing you got to ask yourself: will it affect my treasure? Is this within my means? Is this within my means? See, it's wrong to make an upgrade. It is not a justifiable upgrade if it is outside the portion of money that God has allotted to you, right? And that's kind of a no-brainer. Like, everyone knows this. I'm going to give you an indication that you are going outside of your means of treasure, of wealth that God has appointed for you, that you're probably not going to hear very often. And that's that you know you've crossed the line if you have nothing left to give financially. Look what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 9:8. And the context of this is giving financially to support people who are in need. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having what? All that you need, you will abound in every good work. In the context, if you read the whole passage, every good work is giving financially to meet the needs of other people. Here's the point. God's enough. When He gives you enough, and what He gives you is enough, His enough is enough for your needs and enough for you to meet the needs of other people. And if you find that you no longer have enough to help meet the needs of other people, then you have probably crossed the line into the pursuit of more. Spending all of the portion on your wants. So sometimes I ask myself these questions, right? And the answer is, across the board, is like, okay, this thing that I want, I definitely shouldn't pursue it. Right? This is a materialistic thing. This is the pursuit of more. I have to drop this. But I'm still not content with what I have. Right? I'm still not content. Did you catch back in that passage as we end here in Philippians 4? Paul said he learned the secret. He learned the secret of being content. It's a divinely given ability, right? But watch, here's the secret. To be content, you have to make the most of what you have. To be content, you have to make the most of what you do have. See, people have this idea of contentment in life, that contentment is this passive thing that happens when you finally get enough of something, okay? And if you're waiting for that to happen, again, you'll be waiting a real long time, because the human heart has an insatiable appetite for more. Contentment is not a passive thing that happens in life. Contentment is an active satisfaction in life. A guy named G.K. Chesterton, a Christian writer, said this 100 years ago: true contentment is the power of getting out of any situation all that there is in it. Another pastor named Jeremy McKean says it this way: contentment is the joyful art of making the most of what you have. Most of the time in our lives, our problem isn't that we don't have enough of something. Our problem is that we don't take stock of what we do have and use it to its fullest God-given potential. That's our problem. And that's why we're discontent most of the time. You remember the show MacGyver? It's a lot like MacGyver, right? Remember how every episode of MacGyver would, same thing, right? He'd end up trapped. He'd end up cornered somewhere. There would be people surrounding the building. He had no way out, no nothing, right? Totally ill-equipped, it looked like. And he would look like he was completely doomed. But then what would he do? He'd take stock of the stuff that was in the room with him, and usually with a whole lot of duct tape, right? He'd make like a bomb out of a stereo, toothpicks, and some toothpaste, or he'd make an airplane out of some jugs and some duct tape and an old lawnmower engine, and he'd fly out of that place, right? That's what contentment is like. Contentment is taking stock of what you have and maximizing the potential that's in it. That's exactly what Paul did. He MacGyvered his moment. He MacGyvered his moment. We got to MacGyver our moment. Like, Paul didn't have a whole lot when he was in prison. He didn't have much of anything at all, but he was content. But what did he have? He had a soldier chained to him 24/7. He was being he had access to the Roman Senate. They didn't let just anybody in there. He had a pen and paper. That was what he had. So what did he do with what he had in the moment? He preached the gospel to those Roman soldiers. You never would have heard it otherwise. He preached the gospel to the Roman Senate. That's a big deal. And a lot of them believed the message. It said members of Caesar's own household believed. He took that pen and paper and he wrote letters with them. Letters that we call Philippians, Colossians, Ephesians, Philemon. Became 4 books of the New Testament. He maximized his moment. Those are some pretty significant things he did. He could say, I'm content, I have enough, all my needs are met. I can do everything I want to do with what I have.
Amen.
We got to do the same thing to be content in life. Because the good life doesn't come by the pursuit of more. It comes by being content with what we have. Being content with what we have is an act of satisfaction in life. We got to make the most of what we have. So if you're not content in life, you just got to ask God. You got to say, Father, enable me to see that what you have given me is good and that it is enough. And Father, show me how to use it to its full potential.
Amen.
The potential that you put in it. That's the secret to contentment. When we use the things that God's given us to their maximum potential, then we get the maximum enjoyment out of them that God intended for us to get. Amen? Stand with me, guys.